that this is an extremely accurate clock. So anyway. And today I'm also speaking in the seminar. And then we also have, oh, sorry, I started too early. Okay, I think that now I'm on there. Okay, so I'll start again. My name is Jennifer Dill. I'm a faculty member in the School of Urban Studies and Planning. And along with Rob Bertini, I help organize this seminar. This is the last of this quarter. And today I'm also going to be speaking, but along with me is Randy Jones from Holt and Everhart, who was unable to be here 2 weeks ago when we thought we were going to hear from him, but he's gladly agreed to come back and speak today. So what's going to happen is Randy is going to start and talk to you about Fairview Village, the history, what it's all about, etc. And then I will talk about some of the research that I've been doing in terms of travel behavior at Fairview Village. So with that, I'm going to pass it to you, and I'm going to sit over here.
Well, thank you. It was my fault that I wasn't here 2 weeks ago. So a bit of dyslexia, I think, went on with timing. But it's a pleasure to present Fairview Village to you. And if you haven't had a chance to come and see it, I think you should, because anytime you, hey, Bill, anytime you come into a community, whether it be in Beaverton or Wilsonville or Corvallis or Seattle, there's a certain feel that any community conveys, and I think in large part, as you'll hear hopefully, it's a sense of place that we've tried to conjure and design in producing Fairview Village, and we like many others, and there are more now than when we started, more developers and designers than we started in 1994. That are interested in design and development directives, if you will, such as programs like building livable communities, smart growth, and you can come up with a number of different acronyms for a lot of these even nowadays. Smart growth, and even magazines like Land Development, institutions like the Congress of New Urbanism, the Urban Land Institute. They've been in the forefront and have really been trying to come up with design guidelines nationally that would assist folks like us. When we started in 1994, mixed use, let alone pedestrian-oriented developments, mixed-use developments, pedestrian-oriented developments, transportation-oriented developments, it was a new idea in Oregon for sure, and I would say for the Northwest. Much work had been previously done in Southern California, on the Eastern Seaboard. You've heard about Kentlands. Subsequently, you've probably read about Celebration, about Seaside, Florida, and so on. All communities that decidedly try to convey a sense of place, a style of living. So livable communities, what does that mean? And it certainly means one thing to one person and another to another person. Striking up a logo that reflects hopefully an intent of mixed use, number one, an orientation toward a variety of not just housing types, but a variety in architecture to some extent, while still trying to suture together the idea that you can have diversity and yet traditional architecture, and because it's part of our belief and still is that I think there's a sense that people really do appreciate classically designed towns or villages. And that's very old. We've been designing communities in this country for, say, the last 60 years, oriented around the car. And that has everything to do with transportation networks, but it also has everything to do with even the design of that lot. You've heard about snout house homes and the garage forward and the behavior even that translates into. I come home, I hit my garage door opener, I pull in, close the door, and I'm gone. So the idea that you can have a texture in your place, a diversity, but also an architectural theme that in our case we chose to be somewhat more traditional. So in how we lay out the homes and the buildings and the different physical treatments that we give them. Street design. If you're to have a traditional community, then one that is oriented toward the pedestrian rather than the car, we had to develop some specific street standards for the village and get those approved through the City Public Works Department. And the City of Fairview is its own city. It's an incorporated city since 1908. And so those street standards are narrower than what is, I guess you could say, conventional or typical. 26 feet, for instance, curb to curb in truly single-family detached areas. Pretty narrow. And the first argument that we ran into, as we've heard, is often the first argument you have is with the fire department. You can't design a street with travel lanes less than 20 feet, both ways. You can't have an unobstructed width of less than 20 feet. Why? Because our trucks need 20 feet for emergency response. And you'll hear that over and over, and I still get calls from other developers around the country. And yet a truck isn't 20 feet wide, but it is when they put their outriggers out. So you have an institution, necessary institution, dictating design. And yet we were able to show that with 26 feet, you could park on one side only and still maintain a 20-foot wide clear area. That's one example. But every street in Fairview Village, we've maintained two 10-foot travel lanes. And what we've let flex is the width of the parallel parking, whether it be on one side or on both sides. How you design streets within a project also can help calm traffic. And a lot of that has also then to do with design. Say you have a nice straight long street, that's a fairly strong signal to a lot of drivers, I can go fast. Rather, putting a slight bend in a given street and it's not as long, especially when you add parked cars on the street. Not only is there the chance, and most drivers will look for that odd pedestrian that wants to jump out, so traffic is slowed, and with the bend in the street, they'll tend to slow down a bit. But it also gives then the designer or architects an opportunity for a view termination. So we've tried to make use of some of that. Just a couple minutes here on the evolution of the design. We presented in 1993, we presented to City Council, City of Fairview, a very sketchy, bare bones design and said, what do you think? And it was very sketchy. Mixed use, here's a basic road network, here's the mix of housing, single family apartments, row houses, commercial, mixed use even. And and about how they'd be arranged. And they said, well, yeah, tell us more. Flesh that out and bring it back to us. And so we held a design charrette in May of 1994 where we had probably 100 people over a 3-day period sit down during the course of the first day. And we had 5 tables, engineering, transportation, commercial, environmental, and then just single-family homes. Those 5 tables, they took the same plan, started designing space, started designing feel, and the architects would work all night, put it all together, and present what we collectively came up with the next day, did the same thing, and at the end of 3 days, we ended up with a composite plan, and this is a representation of that effort over the course of those 3 days, where there were builders, brokers, bankers, architects, there was retail folks present, there was builders in residential and in commercial present, all providing their input, so that it provides a real backbone to the concept. So this concept plan, colored, is what we ended up with in 1994 after that 3-day period, and we've tried to stay true to this. The concept plan is abruptly turned away from view terminations. You can see the different streets. For instance, this street here coming around the corner, that street curves simply because Fairview Creek runs through the property in that arc. So the street needed to kind of follow that arc. But the rest of the village tried to approximate a grid. What we were reflecting against, if you will, is the area to the north across Halsey, a major arterial, was the original gridded portion of Fairview, the original village. And it is straight residential, single-family detached grid. An area that citizens in the city really still hold very dear. And we don't want that changed. What is it you're proposing? Can't propose too much change. So we're trying to reflect some of those values. So a modified grid system through the core of the village, but following some of the natural features in addition. Curving some of these streets, like Village Street here, you could just make out a slight bend in Village Street, and in reality, if you were to go out there, you would look south down Village and you would see that bend. It is much more pronounced than this possibly represents, but what terminates that view very clearly is City Hall and its great arch. So it's a pleasing view. Again, it's a traffic calming technique and an opportunity in design. The major intent of the village is pedestrianism. Not only can we not design homes that are oriented toward the car, can we present a place and build a place where people are encouraged and in fact do walk. That is, they'll make a choice. They'll be afforded a choice between getting in their car and driving for that cup of coffee or driving for that basic service and walking. It was a major design goal and still is a goal. Mixed use affords that opportunity so that that person who chooses to live in a single-family detached home does have an opportunity to walk about a quarter of a mile to basic services. Currently, a travel shop, a salon, a coffee shop, an eye doctor, and so on. But in the future, roll in a bank, a video store, a small grocery, we hope, but certainly they can walk to Target and the post office or the library. So there will be more and more choices afforded people to in terms of services in the future as we finish building the village. Pretty high density. It may be one of the critiques, and we've heard it from the marketplace. I want a single-family detached home, and I want the opportunity to walk, and I like the idea of being able to, but I need a bigger yard. So a pretty Western mentality, certainly in the mid-'90s, was still very prevalent. I want my yard, and I want everything else. Can we meet? Excuse me. Can we meet that need and still provide all the other expectations, our expectations and the marketplace's expectations? We decided no, we couldn't. So density in single-family dominated areas like this phase here, 86 single-family detached homes. The density there is about 12 units per acre, whereas if you went to a more conventional subdivision, you might be looking at more like 5.5 or 6 units per acre. So pretty dense, yes, pretty close together, maintaining at least 9 feet between buildings, and that's too close. It's too compact for some buyers. As you get closer toward the center or core area of the village, densities approach 40 units per acre, where you have apartments and row houses and even apartments over retail. So decidedly more dense. Coming back to the point of density, in what that affords us is the opportunity to produce more capital generation, if you will, per area to pay for all of the services and all of the features within the village. But you give up something, and that's in the case of single-family detached lots, you give up some yard area. Has the marketplace responded? Yes. Did it take us a while to get there? Yes. The marketplace has responded. We don't have any units for sale right now. We can't quite build them fast enough. So sales, even given our economic downturn over the past 2 or 3 years, really hasn't deterred us so much. So the demand is there. People have responded to the density. That's okay, because I really like everything else. The mixed-use component of the village and density, as we're surrounded by 4 arterials, Halsey Street to the north, 207th connector, which connects I-84 through to Gleason Street on the south, which will lead you into Gresham and Highway 26, 223rd on the east, surrounded by arterials. One of the first pieces of the first question among the first pieces of approvals was, tell us about the effect of the traffic generated by the village on the arterial system. And so our timing in 1994 was on the heels of Thousand Friends of Oregon's effort in looking at the West Side bypass, if you're familiar with that proposed project. And at that point in time, Thousand Friends had finished their land use model, their transportation model called LUTRAC, land use transportation model. And Kittleson and Associates, a couple weeks ago, Beth Wemple with Kittleson and Associates, a traffic engineering firm here in Portland, took that model and plugged in the plan for Fairview Village, as well as traffic modeling data from Multnomah County for the arterials and some of the adjacent land uses in the area. And at that point in time, the results of the model and what we presented in answer to the question, what's the effect that the model showed was that we could be looking at or anticipate a reduction in vehicle miles traveled of 23% above a conventional development, primarily because of the mixed-use design. That is, people could have the ability to live in the village and work in the village. They'd have the opportunity to live in the village and walk to services rather than generate trips on the exterior arterial system, and because of pass-by opportunities. Services located elsewhere in the region or in the area, passers-by on the arterial would see or learn that services are present in the village and would choose to stop there. So it's not a trip generation, it's taking advantage of a trip that has already been generated on the arterial. So it wouldn't be a trip generated somewhere else. So 23% at that point in time, a huge number, a number that I think some may have even scoffed at. Can't be right, because we were told at the time that in a conventional development you'd be gloriously successful if you had achieved 8 or 9%. So, as ever, I think the question still might be, to some extent, prove it. Show us that that's true. The original concept design for the village had the single big box, which is now Target, located mid-block where that L-shaped building is on the north near Halsey, 40,000 square foot grocery. Because that was a difficult location for commercial brokers and for the grocery industry to really get their heads around, their finances around, because it's mid-block. Remember, a very simple economic model. I want to see a front door. I want drivers to see our front door. I want them to see a parking place, and we want sufficient parking. That's their model. So mid-block didn't work as well. Couldn't you move us? Couldn't you do a rezone and move us closer toward the intersection of 207th and Halsey, which is closer to I-84? We did go through that exercise, and we did rezone this box commercial, pretty conventional commercial development to this corner, which supplanted in the original plan some residential, single-family detached, and row houses. The effect on a second run of the Lutrac model was now you have proportionately more retail, commercial, and less residential, and the results showed that you might now be looking at a vehicle miles travel reduction up to 50%. Another astronomical number, really. And the question, again, still might be, prove it. So I'm very interested in that because to date, we're built out from the southeast corner all the way to a line right about through here. So the Target is built, City Hall is in, the library is built, all of the single-family detached homes are built, about 138 of them. All but 4 of the row houses are built. That's about 135, 138 of those. 124 units of apartments and post office. Gold's Gym, now Bally's Total Fitness, up in the right-hand corner, is built, not technically part of this special plan district. Special plan district as a cutout, if you will, in the comprehensive plan with the city, allowing us to have our own zoning code specific to the village. And so we're built out to that point, and the question then is, do people walk? Do they leave their cars at home more often? Do they make that choice? And I think the answer is yes. Certainly the people that we talk to, the people that are living here now, probably 700 or 800 people out here now, I think they are making that choice. For certain, what people have come to really appreciate, which is what I think they reacted to when they first drove through, was, boy, this feels safe somehow. These streets seem pretty quiet. I like that they're narrow. I might even hear the moms, I might even be okay with my kids throwing the football in the street or tossing the frisbee. Those are good things. Those are values through design that we had hoped might come out of all of this. And so, is it working? Yes, I think it is. Certainly that feeling of security. I know my neighbor. I know they walk, and I've started to also. So the behaviors are starting to change to some extent through a fairly prescriptive design, its own zoning code, its own comprehensive plan policies and goal statements, and through the design itself and architecture. Will that eventually continue? Those behaviors, will they eventually continue to be modified? For instance, how about the behavior? Parking is an issue, because I can't find a parking space. For instance, if you're living in the apartments across the street from the duplexes, you would think, oh, that must be a killer street in terms of parking on the street. Can I find a space on the street to park right in front of my front door? Because I own 3 vehicles, or I own 4 vehicles. And if I can't find a space in front of my front door, then there's a problem. That's a choice and a behavior that results. The choice is, I'd rather park there, and because I really don't want to park half a block away. So is that a behavior that we're going to effect, in our lifetime? I don't know. That is a long-standing kind of, the use and focus on the automobile. Maybe we've been able to effect some changes in the way people live and use their cars and view that aspect of their lives and the way they live. But getting to the point where, I really don't need that second vehicle. I can do with 1. Or I don't need 4. I can do with 2. That's an open question. The future for us is that currently we're still building out the village. And I want to show you some images and then leave time at the end for questions. But we're still building out the village. From a residential standpoint, we're nearly complete. What we have left to do is finish the commercial. And the commercial is split into 2 different land use districts. Village commercial, which is your classic parking lot scenario with, I don't want to use the term too much, but box, certainly a building with its parking. More of that is oriented, as you can even get a feel, toward the arterial to the north. And we made that conscious decision a long time ago that this street right there, separating most of that development or portion of the development from the rest, that is, commercial from the bulk of the residential, was a real line of demarcation. North of that line, given that pretty conventional and staid economic model, is kind of given over in some respects from a design standpoint to the commercial and that part of the market and that part of industry. But south of that line, it was to diminish the reliance on the automobile through design, whether it be through lot patterns or street design or architecture and how the buildings are laid out. One of my goals, personal goals, and is translated into a professional goal, is I came out of environmental science, working in the private sector. So wetlands, water quality, wildlife habitat, so on. And I never got to see the other end of the project. I was always in at the very front, and more often than not, the request was, get me a permit. And that project was either built or it wasn't, and I never saw it again. But clearly, from an environmental standpoint, I think it's clear that those projects were capitalizing on, and you've seen them too, those projects were capitalizing on the value that a natural resource, whether it be a creek or a wetland or lake frontage or view or what have you, what value that resource has for the development. So one way. My interest was to see, can a development look the other way and say the economic energy or opportunity that a development generates, can some of that be oriented back toward the resource? When we purchased the property, 137 acres was held by Tektronix, which was much larger than the village itself. We purchased a portion of that, about 87 acres, and the rest was predominantly was composed of wetland, forested wetland, emergent wetland, or a mosaic of the two. And so the transition has been, with the one exception of a sale to Reynolds School District for an elementary school, the Tektronix did end up donating to the city of Fairview, basically donating the rest of the property, resource areas, most of which located to the west of 207th Avenue, most of which is now in Salish Ponds Wetlands Park, managed by the city of Fairview and owned by the city. So, it's hard to say never, but for the foreseeable future, that likely won't be developed. So, through negotiation, that resource was set aside. We made our own donations to the city of Fairview in terms of open space resource areas. Beyond that, then, is how did we deal with Fairview Creek, which was a highly degraded perennial stream, trout-bearing stream. How did we deal with that when we have 50-foot setbacks from center line of creek to the various homes that line it? 50 feet doesn't sound like a lot. In fact, you may have heard discussions among Metro and the state of Oregon, certainly in Washington, is 100 feet enough? Should setbacks, riparian setbacks, be 300 feet? I think that's a discussion that probably still is ongoing. But 50 feet, is it enough? One of the things that we took advantage of was not just that horizontal dimension, but then built the lots up even higher. And so you have a vertical dimension with some of these finished floors being 15 to 18 feet above the creek itself. Because of past degradation land uses, dairy farming and truck farm operations through most of the 20th century, and it was a transition from dairying to truck farm. That transition alone through dairying, which cows were right down in the creek and there was virtually no vegetation along the creek itself, to truck farm operations, which the farmer didn't want to farm down in the creeks, so the disturbance allowed Himalayan blackberry just to take over. So when we arrived, this entire green swath through here was 20 feet tall Himalayan blackberry, 100 feet wide, really awful habitat. Certainly, about the only benefit it provided was some shade to the creek. But the trout were not faring well. Electroshock efforts on the part of Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife in 1992 showed 3 trout between Fairview Lake, much to the north of us, and then to a point somewhere to the south of us. In 1996, 2 years after we had mowed the blackberry down and replanted with about 4,500 native trees and shrubs, an electroshock effort, we came through the village and found 23 sexually mature cutthroat trout. Even the first year we started seeing more great blue heron and more kingfisher, suggesting that there is a food source there. So to date, I think the trout populations are continuing to expand. They are resident. And that's good news, especially if you consider trout to be any kind of indicator of stream health. Taking out the blackberry, putting in native trees and shrubs, and trying to reinstall a native or a more natural pool riffle sequence through. And that, so that has been, I think, a reward for me to see that, the resource has benefited. In fact, it appears to be thriving. I think it's useful to just page through real briefly some images of where we've been. Not only, and construction can be really messy, and it's hard to keep perspective on what the end goal is. Going from this concept and getting into the use of heavy equipment is seems like polar ends sometimes. But staying stubborn and being stubborn and staying focused, gathering the right team members in the public sector also, so that the plans that we proposed were adopted and now are the city of Fairview's plans also. Moving from this concept and very sketchy renderings even to built products. Getting there, you just have to stay passionate, and you have to keep your goals in mind. Streetscape, really important, and the guys running the heavy equipment, would look at me cross-eyed when I told them, the detail and quality here starts with the curb, so please be careful, whatever they'd say. But it's true. It does start with the curb. It has to look good, because there's only 5 things that you can do with streetscape, really, and that's landscaping, lighting, street width, setbacks, and sidewalks. So, those are all variables that you can play with. But an appealing streetscape really is important. Again, construction can be messy, but paying attention to kind of the bones underneath, like a painter might draw the skeleton first, to the finished product. You might start getting a sense of the style or period of architecture we were hoping for, and initially did get through some of our builders, but as time went on, that quality and attention started to diminish, and I think that largely was a result of our regional economy kind of starting to turn down a bit. Sales started getting tougher, so some of the builders started turning a few more corners. So we started our own construction company. So now we're developers and builders, which is not something I would wish on anyone. It was really it's been a really tough road, but I think we're there. Use of materials. We've always made a point in not only public presentations such as this, but in front of the city, in design review. The use of materials is really important, in single-family detached districts, land use districts in the village, the front setback is going to be, by code, either 10 feet from the back of sidewalk or 15. And so these buildings are right there. When you get into mixed use, the mixed use district, we wrote the zoning code such that the front setback could be 0. So right at the back of sidewalk. So they're touchable materials: brick, stone, wood, classic materials. For instance, fiberglass, or I won't call it plastic, but fiberglass siding, not allowed. Interior, we've had architects make a big deal about, the interior needs to be reflective of the streetscape. And by the same token, interior space, looking outside, the outside needs to become kind of an outdoor room also. Accessory dwelling units. Mixed use, a component of mixed use is choice. Choice in housing styles. And there's a wide variety of choices: single-family detached, row houses, townhomes, apartments, and again, the apartments over retail. But accessory dwelling units, a self-contained apartment over garages, because we have a number of alleys in the village, it affords an opportunity such as this where that is a separate apartment, can be used as a rental, and that income goes right against your mortgage. Can be used for family members. Upon resale, it's certainly an attractive feature of the home. So these have been really popular. We'll probably end up with about 48 accessory dwelling units in the village. Pretty large number. And much of those have come as a result of expressed demand. Built the first few. Boy, that's neat, and that really worked. The best story I like to tell is the duplex owner. So one lot, 2 main units up front with the garage on the alley and the accessory dwelling unit over the garage. There's at least 2 owners living in the apartment over the garage, renting both units out, main units out up front, and they live free. So a tremendous investment. Row houses. Row houses are not new in Portland, but we were among the first in East County at this point in time, and we were daft, according to a number of folks, and it was a stretch, because East County is not. I think it does have a reputation, probably unfounded, but a reputation is simply a bedroom community to Portland or to Gresham. Where is Fairview? Well, it's almost Troutdale. It's just north of Gresham. Okay. Well, it's right across the street from the dog track. Oh, I know where that is. So, there's this identity thing that goes on too. But row houses in Fairview, wow. But they've done really well. The first 5 we built, the first 3 were sold before they were finished framing. So, maybe it's in the category of you never know. But I think it's also somewhat in the category of time tested. Row houses have been a popular style, but maybe not just out here. More row house images. So draw the picture and build the picture. Much of what we've tried to do. Draw the picture, present that, get it approved, not only by the city but by your lenders, among the real estate community, and then build the picture. This is Main Street, so you can look down and you see the turn that I mentioned looking at City Hall. So that view termination technique does work. And you can see the travel lanes. When you do park both sides, it does slow traffic significantly. Our real estate broker, I don't know why that image is in there. Apartments, Chinook Way apartments, how do you fit in a block and a half a transition from single-family detached to townhomes to duplexes to apartments? It's a huge number of transitions. And so, when folks are putting up $200,000, $250,000 for a single-family home, they're looking across the street. What are you going to build there? And how does that look? How big are they? Where do they park? What are the materials? Just really, really cautious. This has not been done very much, and it's probably, when it has, it's probably been done pretty poorly. We think that in 15 or 20 years, people coming back and looking at the village, this is where we think we'll be judged, is this area of transition. How they'll look at turnover in sales. They'll look at price point. They'll look at parking. They'll look at streetscape. But I think this is where we'll be judged. So the scale of these buildings, somewhat distorted by the lens of the camera, but no, they're pretty big buildings. Long axis oriented away from the neighborhood, so you're presenting less of a facade. What I will say is the people living in the apartments love it, because finally they've been afforded an opportunity, because they have to rent, or by circumstance are only afforded that choice to rent. They can live in a village. They can live in a town center. And so they're not pushed off to somewhere down the arterial somewhere else. They can live in a village. And so turnover in the apartments has been very low, and demand has stayed up because of that. My most current project, Park Lane Apartments, great architecture. We really want to present this project, 62 units, the last apartments, a major apartment project in the village, and we really want to present this well to the street, because the street deserves it, but there's also owners in row houses right across the street. Now, they knew that this is going to be apartments coming in, so great architecture, typically 1 and 2 bedroom units only, mostly 1 bedroom. So there is that end of the market that we're shooting at. This is mixed use, showing retail on the ground floor and apartment above. Doesn't have to be used as commercial space, can be used as residential throughout. Similarly, even these units along the main street have the accessory dwelling unit on the alley. And strong pedestrian connections. We ended up with a distance of about 450 feet between streets, north to south, and nothing in between. So no street grid in between. So one of the very first items or elements that we drew in the concept plan was a strong pedestrian connection through that center area. Same thing here. Townhomes attached fee simple units. And I think I'm just going to end right here, Jennifer. The library. It has been a tremendous addition to the village. On one end, we had City Hall. The city of Fairview forever had been in a Grange building in the original community, and had grown to the point where there just wasn't any more room for staff because they and still do have always combined staff with police department and planning and administration. So the new city hall was built, and that was a great addition. We were finally successful in getting a post office constructed in the village, but then the library, a bond measure came up in the mid-90s, and we were selected among 3 different sites in East County for a branch library. So Fairview Community Library, Fairview Columbia Library was built. What's interesting about the library is not only is it a really great civic anchor with City Hall, library, post office, you get this real strong connection between the civic anchors, but there's apartments over the library. So there's 4 apartments over the library, and we were successful in retaining ownership of the building. So long-term capital lease with Multnomah County, that allowed them to invest their monies up front and be done with the lease payments for a long period of time. But then we get to rent out the apartments above, and that helps pay for building maintenance and so on. And so, it might come up in questions, but you have an image of the librarian, with apartments above, and we can talk about that. Great civic involvement. I mean, people really are active. I've got some flyers of the village that you can pass out and around. And this map is in the centerfold. Thank you.
Oh, what happened there? I don't know why my screen went. Okay, I'm going to try to figure out how to get the screen back down. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Maybe there's someone back there who fixed it for me. Okay, so I'm going to continue on. So now we know a bit about Fairview Village. And Randy sort of posed the question of, well, show me, is it working? And so I'm hopefully going to provide some answers to that. First of all, I want to acknowledge some of my students who helped on this, Mike Rose, Matt Lauer, and Carrie Tyler. Matt and Mike are here. I'm going to go over sort of the research questions very briefly, our methodology and our findings. I'm focusing on the travel. There's a lot more that we found in the survey that I'm not going to be talking about today, but we can talk about it later, or I'm working on an article that hopefully you'll be able to read at some point. So some of the questions were, do people in a new urbanist neighborhood travel differently? And in particular, do they walk more? Do they drive less? And if so, why? And another question related to that is, why do people choose to live in a new urbanist neighborhood? And there's this whole issue in the travel behavior, land use area of whether there's this issue of self-selection, whether the people who are living there really just wanted to live in a place where they could walk, and that's what's happening. It's not the land use that's affecting the travel behavior, it's the land use that's affecting who lives there, and that in turn impacts travel behavior. So what did we do? We did a mail-out, mail-back survey, except the very first round was hand-delivered. So the first round wasn't mailed out, but the second round of surveys was mailed out. It was a household survey, or in the packet there was a household survey that the head of the household filled out that asked questions like, how long have you lived here? What was important to you when you chose where to live? There was an adult survey that there were 3 copies each adult in the household was supposed to fill out, and that's where we asked about how many trips did you make by mode for different purposes. There was also a survey, a travel survey to be filled out by the children. We didn't get enough of those back to really analyze it, so I'm not going to be talking about kids' travel behavior. Where did we do this? We did this in Fairview Village. And we chose 2 control neighborhoods nearby, and I'll talk about those. The one thing I will say is that we missed, we included all what we, we tried to include every household in all of these neighborhoods. What we missed were the accessory units above the garages that Randy talked about, and those 4 apartments above the library. I realized we didn't have those. So we tried to choose control neighborhoods that were similar in a number of respects, in that they were built about the same time, mid to late 90s, up to last year. All of the neighborhoods had sidewalks throughout, and they actually all had the narrow streets, the 26-foot wide streets, though in the other neighborhoods it maybe didn't seem that narrow because of the design of the neighborhood. Similar values in terms of the single-family homes. FV, Fairview Village, A and B is our other 2 neighborhoods. So the median values were roughly the same. The range, though, you can see on Fairview Village was much greater in that you have the townhomes and the row houses that are going to be at the lower end. But you also had more at the higher end. This data is all from ARLIS, from the Metro database. Also, we chose, in terms of the single-family homes, so this doesn't include the apartments, similar size of homes. But again, you see the range at Fairview Village is much wider because you have some of the smaller homes available, the row houses, townhouses, etc. But we're trying to get roughly similar demographics is what we're trying to get at here. What were the differences, though? I mean, the primary difference, and this is what we're after, is that Fairview Village is a new urbanist style development. There are shopping and public services, including a post office and library, within a quarter-mile walking distance of most homes and a half-mile of all the homes within the development. There are smaller lots, so a higher density of the homes in Fairview Village than the other 2 developments. There is a greater range of housing types in Fairview Village. The style of the houses is a bit different, most of them having front porches, some of them having alleys. And in terms of open space, one thing Randy didn't mention is that there are a lot of parks, pocket parks, scattered throughout the Fairview Village development, in addition to the large wetlands area and a larger developed park. So there was more park space available in Fairview Village. This map sort of shows you, the red line is a quarter-mile walking distance from this star. And the star, the library, whoops, I have the arrow wrong. The library is there, the post office is over here, Target's there, and in here is some of that other retail, the coffee shop, the optometrist, that kind of stuff with the housing above. Just to also point out, there's a preschool down here. And we've already mentioned the Gold's Gym is up here, the apartments are here. So that's our Fairview Village. In terms of other neighborhoods, the control neighborhoods were all single-family detached homes, and they had limited commercial or parks within walking distance. This is neighborhood A. They were also close by. These neighborhoods are just a little farther to the east in Troutdale. Probably certainly less than 5 miles away. You can see neighborhood A actually does have some retail within walking distance. There's a grocery and strip mall over here, this star sort of indicating the entrance point to that, though this street that you would have to cross to get there is a pretty busy, non-pedestrian friendly type of crossing. But actually, the folks in this neighborhood, all of them do actually live within a half-mile walking distance of that destination. The neighborhood B, there is no commercial destination within the quarter-mile walking distance. There is a very nice park that is within walking distance, a quarter mile of actually all the homes in neighborhood B. So we sent out the survey. We sent it out twice. The people who didn't respond the first time got another survey. They got reminder postcards. We were able to get what I thought was a really good response for a mail-out type survey, 45% from Fairview Village, 29% from the control neighborhoods. As a result of that, we had 185 valid adult surveys from Fairview Village and 136 from the control neighborhood. So a decent response, and we were able to show some, statistically significant differences based on that sample size. So a summary of what's to come. The people in Fairview Village walk more. I'm sort of giving you the bottom line ahead of time in a way. The people in Fairview Village wanted to live in a place where they could walk. It's unclear from this survey whether the Fairview Village residents are driving less, and I'll show you there's some evidence that they are, and there's other evidence that they maybe are not, or they are, but for different reasons. We'll see. So the survey, the adult survey, asked for the number of trips that were made from home to various destinations by various modes the previous week. So this isn't all of the trips that these people make. It's just trips from their home, because we wanted to focus on the impact of the neighborhood on their travel decisions. This was done in May and June, and the weather was reasonably good during the 2 weeks that we chose.
Great.
Okay, so what did we find out? First of all, in terms of total trips reported, in Fairview Village, these are averages for the adults, per adult, for a 7-day week from home. Total number of trips, 19.66 in Fairview Village and 16.76 in the control neighborhoods. So the adults in Fairview Village are actually making more total trips, but as we'll see, it's because they're making more walking trips. Really no difference in transit trips at all. And there is a difference in bike trips that's just about significant depending on your threshold. But what I want to focus on more are the vehicle trips and the walking trips. And what I put in white is what the differences that were significantly different between Fairview Village and the control neighborhood. So you can see up top that the adults in Fairview Village the previous week actually made a little over 2 fewer vehicle trips over the course of the week. And in particular, they made fewer vehicle trips to shopping, to restaurants, and to the library. The modes that are in black, which you probably can't read very well, there wasn't a significant difference between Fairview Village and the control neighborhoods. What I want to focus on a little more are the walking trips, because this is where we saw some really large differences really across the board. And most surprisingly, and I'll admit, going into this, I wasn't sure what I was going to find. I wasn't, to be honest, completely convinced that the people in Fairview Village were going to be walking a lot. The village wasn't completely done. All the destinations weren't there. The couple times I was out there, the timing was probably off. I didn't see a huge number of people walking around. But in fact, they really did walk a lot more. The adults made almost 1 walking trip a day when you think about a 7-day week compared to the control neighborhoods, the 6.55 versus 1.66. And it was virtually across the board for almost every trip purpose except personal business. So they're making, in particular, more shopping trips walking, more trips to restaurants and cafes walking. They're visiting friends and relatives. They're going to the library. They're going to the post office. They're walking to that health club up in the corner. They're walking to parks more often. Recreation would be if they're just taking a walk around the neighborhood, for example. And they're doing that far more often, too. And that, in particular, is interesting because in all these neighborhoods, you could walk around the block, and they're all safe. They're all nice neighborhoods, aesthetically pleasing, etc. So even the recreation, the folks in Fairview were walking more. And I did go back and double check. For example, on the shopping, the one neighborhood didn't have any shopping. The other neighborhood did. Even the neighborhood that did have shopping, there was a significant difference between that neighborhood and Fairview. So even in the control neighborhood where there was a shopping center close by, the folks there weren't walking as much to shopping. The survey also asked, do you walk more here than where you used to live? Because all of these people lived here for less than 10 years because of when the houses were built. So we figured they could, and particularly in Fairview Village, it's even more recent. 71% of the Fairview Village adults said, yes, I'm walking more, and 53% of the control neighborhood adults said they're walking more. You can question, because if this is true, you know, we're all walking a lot more. But They said they're walking more than where they used to live. The difference was we asked them, why are you walking more? And in Fairview Village, they were more likely to say, because there's places to walk to. That was more often a reason than in the control neighborhoods. In the control neighborhoods, they were more likely to say, I got a dog, or I'm trying to be more healthy, or lifestyle changes is what was prompting them to walk more. So in terms of difference in vehicle travel, we already saw that there were fewer vehicle trips from home per adult in Fairview Village, which indicates that possibly they are substituting walking trips or bike trips for vehicle trips. Now, we also asked how many vehicles are in your household, and on average, how far do you drive them per week for 3 separate vehicles. There were fewer vehicles per household in Fairview Village, and there were fewer weekly vehicle miles traveled, even when you combined all of their vehicles in each household. But, and I do have to caution a little bit, some of these differences are really explained by differences in household size and who's living in Fairview Village versus the other neighborhood. So you can see a big difference in the number of vehicles per household, Fairview Village versus the control neighborhood, and even still differences in vehicles per adult between the neighborhoods. And a very large difference, this is total weekly VMT, so all 3 vehicles combined, over 100 miles difference. But one thing that we noticed on the surveys is the people in Fairview Village were more likely to be either single adult households or to not have kids. So it's a slightly different makeup of households in Fairview Village. So once you look at total weekly VMT per adult, there's still a difference. It's not quite as huge. And if you look at total weekly VMT per person, so that would take into account having kids, there wasn't a difference between the 2 places. Okay, so there's a different mix of people living in Fairview Village, and that explains some of the difference in vehicle travel, but not everything. And the one thing I do have to caution is that this wasn't a complete travel diary assessment of travel, which is ideally what we would do. Is we'd have a travel diary where people would record every trip that they make over a period of time with miles and everything else. And that would give us a better idea of what's going on. So we also asked each household to rate the importance of several factors that they considered when choosing their current home. 1 was not at all important, 7 extremely important. And these were, I put these in the order of top 10 for Fairview Village. Again, scale 1 to 7 important. And for these top 10 reasons, there was no significant difference between Fairview Village and the control neighborhoods. Everyone's concerned about safety, the style of the neighborhood, price. There's some differences you can see, like having sidewalks seemed to be more important to Fairview Village, though it wasn't statistically significant. Where you really start to see some interesting differences is on the next 7 factors, and again, these are in order of importance for the Fairview Village folks. These are all in bold, meaning the differences between Fairview and the control neighborhoods is significant. The people in Fairview Village were more concerned about having parks. And then, in particular, some of these features of the village that are unique, having stores within walking distance, a library, a post office, cafes, restaurants, having bike lanes and paths nearby. Those features of this style of development were definitely more important to the residents of Fairview Village than in the control neighborhoods. And you can see both the absolute numbers and also where these things ranked on the scale. The other difference, though, in terms of size of yard, was more important to the folks in the control neighborhood than it was in Fairview Village. And as we've mentioned, the yards for the single-family homes are definitely smaller in Fairview Village, and that wasn't as important to the folks living there. As we move on to sort of the last things, the lower ranked things, we see another difference here. Quality of schools, which is often a really key factor in home purchase decisions, was not nearly as important for the Fairview Village folks, and largely because a larger percentage of them did not have children. And that was far more important for the control neighborhoods. The folks in Fairview Village were more concerned about being close to public transit. There are a couple bus lines on those arterials, but we saw before there actually wasn't a huge difference in transit trip-making behavior. And I can't necessarily explain the difference in concern over property taxes between, I need to go and find out. These are in two different cities, and I don't know if there is a big difference in property taxes between them. Well, one thing, actually, that thing at the bottom, having schools within walking distance, I guess maybe it's a little disappointing that in the control neighborhoods where there were more kids that didn't rank very high, and it's sort of indicative that our kids aren't walking to school. And then a question often comes up. A lot of proponents of new urbanism state that these types of environments can promote a better sense of community, people will know each other, etc. And we asked a series of questions of each individual about things that they thought about their neighborhood. And here's where we actually didn't see much of a difference between the neighborhoods, in particular if we focused on the single-family homes. And for example, this idea of knowing your neighbors. I can recognize most of the people who live on my street. Well, when there were all respondents, the people in Fairview Village actually ranked less, saying, I don't know my neighbors. But that's partly because I took out the apartment dwellers, and it's virtually even. And I can understand if you're in an apartment, you may not know the people on your street, the way the question is worded. You may know the people in your building, but not necessarily in the duplexes down the street. There were, some differences. For example, that bottom one, if there's a problem in this neighborhood, people who live here can get it solved. People in Fairview Village were more likely to agree with that, though they were a little less likely to agree with, I care about what my neighbors think of my actions. So it's a little unclear what's going on. The one thing that is clear is when I look at just the Fairview Village residents, the folks who walk more were more likely to say, I can recognize most of the people on my street, or that they didn't agree with the very few of my neighbors know me. So it did seem that the walking was a way to get to know neighbors. I would suspect that in the other neighborhoods, they're meeting their neighbors in some other fashion besides walking. Quickly, in terms of conclusions, I think people living in Fairview Village a lot of them were looking for a place to live where they could walk. They found it, and they're definitely taking advantage of it. Is it all due to self-selection? I don't think it's all due to self-selection. And one indicator of that, on the bottom here is that ranking of importance of having stores within walking distance. 1 meaning not important at all, and 7 meaning extremely important. The folks in Fairview Village, and then on the y-axis is the average number of walking trips to a store during that week. And you can see, well, people who ranked it in both cases, 1 or 2, didn't go. They don't walk. But the folks in Fairview Village, which are the red bars, there actually isn't a big difference in terms of their propensity to walk in relationship to how important it was for them to have places to walk. But for the folks in Neighborhood A, which had shops within walking distance, there is a relationship. The more important walking was, the more likely they were to walk. Where in Fairview Village, there isn't that clear relationship, which indicates somewhat that there were some people who were ranking at 3 and 4 that maybe walking wasn't very important to them. They've moved there, and now maybe they are walking. But I've already mentioned some of the limitations to this research in terms of the methodology, but I still think that the findings, a difference of 6.5 trips versus 1.5 trips or whatever it was, I can't explain that all away just to survey design or something like that. I mean, there really is a difference in walking behavior in these areas. And as I already mentioned, the survey, there's a lot more that I haven't presented. I've only presented some highlights, and we can talk about it more. And I'm still playing with the data, as is Mike. And so there's a lot more that we're going to get out of this, but it's just a start. So what I will do now is we're going to open it up to questions to both Randy and I, and we'll go from there. And I'll try to keep track, because I'm still the instructor at the same time as being the person. John.
Randy, can you talk about the financing for a bit, debt, equity, and any assistance from the government in the way of property tax abatements or SDC waivers or grants or anything?
The context to start with there is 1994, and we're a 4-person company, and we've never done this before. Sounds promising. So we started with single-family homes. We started in that southeast corner here. It was all single-family detached homes. Oh, so a recognizable product with the lending industry, and we were still held over a barrel at about 65% loan to value. So makes it tough when at that ratio to take what you can in terms of proceeds and move to the next phase in a 7-phase project. But we were able to get lending enough to build infrastructure, build the lots to a point where we could start generating sales. The price points, you got a flavor for price points. We started out in single-family detached. When we started, the low end was 139, high end was 280, right across the street from each other. And so, the lending or the appraisal institutions out there were going crazy. How do I do this? How do I appraise a village? Where are my comparables? Really tough. And it took 3 good solid years for us to kind of weather our way through that. In addition, weather our way through the real estate community. It's a lot harder to sell an idea than it is a built product in the conventional neighborhood, because it went up fast. It's done. There's your house, kind of thing. If you buy here, yeah, you will have a grocery, or at least that's part of the plan. That isn't as warm and fuzzy to a potential purchaser. Conventional lending has been the byline. We were very interested initially in either a local improvement district or tax increment financing. We were right on the heels of Measure 5, so that was not an opportunity for us, nor was the local community in a position even to sponsor a local improvement district. So the infrastructure improvements were all funded by the private sector, which, that's just what it was and what it is. The system development charges, they run from parks to sewer to storm to water and on through. We've paid all those. And, just like everywhere else, they continue to be on the rise. I think the interesting dynamic is, what are cities doing? And I think out here, meaning out there in East County, where you have Troutdale, Wood Village, Fairview, Gresham, Troutdale, Wood Village, Fairview, relatively small communities, they're looking, what is Wilsonville doing in Gladstone? And what about Estacada? And they're looking what everybody else is doing. Well, we should be there too. So there's been, at least from our standpoint, and while I know that's biased because we're private sector and have to pay the fees, we feel like there's this, status quo that's somewhere out there that everyone's trying to achieve for some reason. So I know that, costs of staff, insurance, and all that are rising for most communities. But all that's paid by the private sector.
And I forgot to do you want some water?
Oh,
I forgot to remind people to use the microphone when you ask questions, and then I have to grab the laptop with the email questions. And Morgan.
Well, this is a question perhaps both you can comment towards, but Jennifer, in your presentation where you had the little lines demarcating like how far a a quarter mile is from a certain point. I'm curious if you considered or didn't consider transportation, transit stops, the distance from transit stops. Because I know a lot of walking trips, can be made to a local shop, but if you want to get to work or something, and you want to try to reduce vehicle miles traveled, one thing would be make residences within walking distance to a transit stop. And so maybe you talk to that. And also last week we talked a little bit about how there's these major arterials around the community where the transit routes are, but your village center wasn't near one of these arterials. Maybe you could talk about why that wasn't after Jennifer.
I haven't looked closely at the transit behavior yet. There are transit stops, and maybe you know better, they're along 223rd and there's some along Gleason, and I don't know exactly where they are.
There's a transit stop right here along 223rd. There is no transit service on Gleason, and there's transit service on Halsey with an improved stop that will be further improved in the future here, and another stop here.
And then your second question was on...
So you didn't look at
So
it.
there's the arterial with its transit. Why the town center here? We're not going to be moving arterials, so we have this piece of property. Part of our intent, I guess you could say, designing toward a more of a center here, away from the arterial. We wanted commercial activity, and some of that commercial activity in through here is also office, village office, that land use district. So wanted to pull back from that transit area for that reason, give that over to the commercial area, while still, this is easily within the quarter mile to the transit station. And the rest was, the rest of the answer, I think, is having to do with what is the rest of the village. Well, it's primarily straight up residential. And so moving the town center closer toward those folks and, incorporating more of those folks within that quarter mile circle was important too.
I just wanted to say, perhaps if Jennifer's map had the sense of scale seems to be that it's too far to walk, but maybe it is within a quarter mile just following the street out to the bus stop.
Yeah.
But I know for people to walk to a bus stop, it has to be really close.
I'll have to incorporate the drawing that I've done of the quarter mile circle in the PowerPoint, but if you, on the coffee shop right here, which is the nexus I chose, probably for political reasons, the quarter mile circle reaches out to about here. And incorporates all of this. So and then I even drew a 2-minute circle, really to drive home the point, mostly having to do with, mostly having to do with parking. But the 2-minute circle is right in here.
John?
Yeah, I was wondering, did you have a connection to this piece of land specifically? Or did you ever think about doing a Fairview Village along a light rail stop, as a possibility? This was an opportunity for us. At one point in time, say middle 80s, Tektronix business, took a little bit of a dip, and their board decided that some of the properties that they were holding needed to be conveyed. So, their fiduciary responsibility to their stockholders needed to give some back, and so they wanted to sell some of their property. This was to be Tektronix world headquarters at one point in time. So you would have seen, big boxes and so on across much of this, and but it's not on light rail. We're 5 minutes on a bus ride from light rail in Gresham. Have we looked for other opportunities? We've had our hands full with this one. Would we? Sure. I think
at least ridership on light rail has turned our heads, and that looks like it could be a great opportunity. There are Orenco Station is probably the one development that we've been compared to most closely, and hopefully there will be others. Hopefully they will have more access to light rail, and so choices and behaviors can even be further modified.
Jennifer, in your survey, was there any question regarding people's grocery shopping? Because it seems to me the lack of a grocery store in this village is really a huge obstacle. If everyone living here has to drive to meet their grocery needs, it's probably against the goal of reducing the total auto trips.
Yeah,
Is there anything being done to solve this problem?
we just looked at shopping trips in general. The one thing that I should point out, and I didn't focus on this because over here, across 223rd, there's actually a Fred Meyer, which is actually within walking distance of within a quarter mile of particularly some of the homes over in this direction. And a Lowe's, though I don't think people are walking to Lowe's. But so there is some access, but with this survey, we weren't able to distinguish exactly which destination they were walking to, or if it was for grocery shopping versus some other type of shopping. Now, the target, certainly it's not groceries, but it's also, the type of shopping for your everyday type, not everyday, but it's for household needs as opposed to a specialty type store. So it serves some of that function, but obviously not all of it.
The other part of your question was, are we still interested in trying to resolve that? Absolutely. With the advent of the 207th connector, which I think in many ways took the place of the Mount Hood Parkway, which was the connection between I-84 and Highway 26 in Gresham, which was not built, was proposed and some design work done on. This, in many ways, took the place of that. And so you had this traffic being siphoned off of I-84 and other connections to Highway 26. So, pretty large volume of traffic here on to Gleason to 223rd and south to Gresham and 26 when we were first starting. And so, approaching United Grocers or Cub Foods or Albertsons or Safeway or Nature's or Trader Joe's or, take your pick. They were, and it's fair to say they were all looking, in particular Albertsons and Safeway. They're already competitors in the area. They were looking for some sites, and it's probably fair to say they're always looking for good sites. But after we had built through here, we were about to hear, we actually did get a master lease signed with United Grocers, and that was their location. We built all the infrastructure off of Halsey to provide for it. Expended a lot of capital getting there, but then their business took a little bit of a dip, and the lease was broke. So at that point, we were back out in the field and talking with all these different folks. And the first comment we heard was, boy, it's too bad that we couldn't have been right here, because we have all this traffic. We've got the dog track, Multnomah Greyhound Park, this link to Gresham. Really would have loved to have been right here. And our demographic and financial analysis shows that. Number one site. Number two site was, we'd really like to be right here. And number three site, well, if we had to, but we're not going to do anything with that because we don't want to be mid-block. So where are we now? Well, we've got a target. Yeah, that helps, certainly. Because of the change in the way that the Multnomah Greyhound Park property was subdivided, Fred Meyer did go in, and Lowe's did go in over there, and they're probably too far to walk, and it's not a real thrilling, kind of pleasing walk across the parking lots to get to Fred Meyer, but they are there. So where does that leave us? And what are we thinking about? Well, we're probably back to a scenario where if we can do it in the economy that we're in right now and have been in for a couple of years, our ideal would be to find an operator, a great operator of a smaller grocery, like a specialty shop, and maybe 15 to 25,000 square foot kind of mom and pop, for lack of a better term, grocery. That would serve a lot of need right here. That's what we hope for. We'll see. I think if we're as much hostage to our regional economy as anyone, and if the things get better, I think we can make some of that work, which is interesting too. We've you might want to know we actually circulated a questionnaire about 3 years ago. Would you support a Trader Joe's in Fairview Village? And we got like 500 responses, and 420 said absolutely. Yes, a Trader Joe's. So there is a pent-up, I think, demand. But it is a field of dreams kind of thing. Build it, and maybe they'll come.
I know we're a little over, but we actually got 3 questions via email today, which was unusual. So there are people out there in Webland watching us. And I'm just going to at least put one of them out there. There's someone who does praise this development for great design work and high standard for design, but a little disappointed that not all of the sidewalks are there yet, particularly the sidewalks in the areas that aren't developed yet. And so maybe respond to that.
As I said, we're built out to about this point right here through the village, with most of the residential being constructed. This piece has been tough for us with that investiture of capital, relatively small company. We've had to stay focused on really where the on the smaller pieces, for us, easier to finance, and so continuing momentum, for lack of a better word, continuing momentum. We're still building the village. Getting to these bigger pieces here means we need a stronger regional economy and players out there, or users, end users, to come in and either lease or buy, which has left a pretty large portion of frontage vacant. Even coming back the other way, that hasn't necessarily done us favors either in showing the property. Here's all this vacant land, and then finally, you're into, the village by the time you get to the first intersection. We have constructed one linking sidewalk here. This street is finished, but there's a lot of other improvements yet to make. So the watcher, the viewer, is correct. There's a lot of other improvements yet to make.
Okay, we've gone over, so I'll have to cut things off. But thank you very much, and for students, good luck with finals.